The attitude at the time was we could fly anything that they designed. Why didn't would have your career been terminated had you stood up and said to management, we will not fly this spacecraft because it's basically Apollo crap?
Well, on items like that, we had a lot of say if we felt like that was the risk. And I won't say it wasn't necessarily a bad spacecraft, it just wasn't at the level that we wanted it to be. Gus was aware of it, Wally Schirra was the commander of our mission, he was aware of it, but they were not what we considered so bad that we couldn't handle what those problems were. And they were already implementing those on what we call the Block 2 spacecraft, some of those things. For example, we had been working on trying to get a better hatch than we had for months and months, and there was problems and delays and costs and what have you. But we basically felt like we could handle it. I don't know anybody here that wouldn't have thought they could have handled the Block 1 spacecraft.
You know, I was commander of the backup crew up until just before the fire, and the problem was, you know, there wasn't anything wrong with the spacecraft per se. The systems were okay. We had a fire problem, but we had that fire problem through Mercury, all the way through Gemini and into Apollo. It was something that we didn't really appreciate, and that spacecraft was pressurized at 20 pounds per square inch, 100% oxygen. Excuse me, when the fire started, and if you had a cigarette and you lit the cigarette, it would burn like this at 20 psi, and we didn't appreciate that. And as Walt said, we had Block 2 come. He was going to fly the second Block 1, but it blew up. So anyway, there were a lot of things wrong with it, but you know, this was a long time ago, and we didn't understand that stuff. But we really didn't face up to the fire problem until after Apollo 1. And then we flew with nothing flammable in the spacecraft. Even the stuff that the guys took on board that were personal were encased in a beta cloth, which is a non-flammable material. So there wasn't anything flammable after that. It's just too bad.
Sure made that underwear itch.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, my underwear caught on fire a couple of times. And as a matter of fact, on Apollo 13, that fire occurred in 1,000 psi oxygen, and you can burn steel in that kind of environment. So, and that problem that on Fred's spacecraft started years and years and years before the flight. When we were shifting from Block 1 to Block 2 spacecraft, they were supposed to change the micro switches from 60 volts AC to 60 volts DC. Some engineer didn't do that. They were 60 volts DC. They arced more, and they welded the contacts together, and ultimately it caused a fire. So, you know, we didn't know everything that you're supposed to know. We still don't.
Yeah, one benefit, just a small point, in the modifications made, they did a much better job with the wiring, obviously, and hermetically sealing, which I think saved our bacon also on Apollo 13, because the spacecraft got very damp. In fact, when Jack and I got back in to try to power up the command module, we had to get a rag out to wipe off all the instruments so we could see them. They were covered with water. And everywhere you look behind on any kink in anything, there was a glob of water sitting. So we got rained on at the upper end of entry. So the fact they had medically sealed that stuff kept us from probably having some kind of a short and a problem at that point when we were getting ready to power back up. In fact, we followed a procedure Jack and I agreed with. As we're going down circuit breaker rows, we put in 6 and stop and see if we smelled anything. Proceeded to the next 6 so we could back up and try to pull a circuit breaker on what maybe was shorting, but we had no problems at all. And I'm sure due to those modifications that were made following Apollo 1.
Yeah, and back in Mercury, the last flight, there was a lot of condensation that formed in the spacecraft and shorted out all kinds of systems. So when they got around doing the reentry, it was pretty damp inside, and they only had part of the system. When I flew Gemini 4, they wanted us to keep our helmets on with the faceplate closed for 4 days so that we wouldn't breathe moisture into the cabin because they were worried about hermetically sealed or non-hermetically sealed things. So there's a lot of these things that you don't know until you make a mistake. You learn in a hurry.
Thank you.